Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming. What a wonderful turnout we have today. We were really pleased to have this program on what is the first full day of spring. We thought, what better than to have a program about birds? So, first of all, before I introduce our speaker, I would like to say we'd like to thank the Wayland Cultural Council. This program is supported in part by a grant from the Wayland Cultural Council, which is part of the Massachusetts Cultural Council. So thank you very much. We have Barbara Holtz here, who is a member of the Cultural Council, as their representative. So we'd like to thank the Cultural Council for their support. We have with us today John Root. John Root is a naturalist, a musician, and a landscaper. He does a little bit of everything. He has many different programs, musical programs, and lecture programs on all kinds of things to do with nature, on wildflowers, on butterflies, many different topics. But today we're very happy to have him do his Songbirds of the Northeast. So without further ado, here is John Root.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I'd like to see a show of hands. How many of you consider yourselves to be birders? Probably everyone could raise your hand to a certain extent, right? I mean, we all love to watch birds, but you know, the people who identify themselves as birders, well, you probably have several things. You probably have at least one pair of binoculars. You probably have at least one manual to identify the birds. You might even have a life list. Some people, you know, if you're a serious birder with a capital B, sometimes you'll jump in the car at a moment's notice, drive hundreds of miles at the chance of seeing a rare bird that's been sighted such and such a place. I'm not one of those, but I would welcome any of you, whether you identify yourself as a birder or not, to contribute to this presentation by adding your own experiences, your own knowledge of these birds, and that way it can be a kind of a symposium. Now, the photography, none of the photographs are mine, none of the recordings are mine, so I have to give credit where credit is due. Lloyd Spitanik is a wonderful photographer. You can do a search for his photography online, wildlife in general, but birds in particular. He lives in New York City, and you wouldn't believe what he finds in Central Park. Because Central Park is an oasis for birds on their paths, migrant pathways. Joe Oliverio, I come from Amherst, Massachusetts, and I knew Joe before he was famous. He lived right around the corner from me, and that was before he became a birder and before he became a photographer. He did both pretty much simultaneously, and over a course of a couple of years, he was amazing at both of them. So a lot of his photos have also been featured. And allaboutbirds.org is a website, Cornell Laboratory of Ornithology, and it's great to learn all kinds of interesting facts about the birds, but also you can hear their recordings. And in addition, there's a wonderful recording with featuring Lang Elliott, and he was commissioned by the Stokes, Lillian and Donald Stokes. Now they are the birders with a capital B. They know their birds so well because they've been out in nature and they've been observing them. They've written so many books. I'd say they probably know more about bird behavior than any ornithologist, whether they have a PhD after their name or not. So on with the show. The passerines are the true songbirds. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't other kinds of birds out there that also sing and make pleasing songs, but, for example, the mourning dove, that's not a songbird. Woodpeckers are not songbirds. So the passerines, or perching birds, are technically the passeriformes. Those are the songbirds. And they have an anisodactyl toe arrangement. How's that for a new word for your vocabulary today? That means 3 claws in front and 1 in back. And you can see that's very good for perching, which is why they're called perching birds. Did you know that a bird falls asleep while perching? Those nests that they make, those are just for the young, just to lay their eggs and incubate their eggs. But after those birds have fledged, they don't use that nest as their boudoir. They just hang out. They perch, and hopefully in a fairly sheltered place. Why don't they fall off the branch when they fall asleep at night? Have you ever thought about that? Well, they don't fall off because as their legs sag, they entering La La Land, they can't help but grab the branch even tighter, just the way the legs are moving. Okay, that's how they stay on. All songbirds have 12 tail feathers, 6 on each side. And they have those wonderfully complex muscles that control the syrinx, which is right above, as you can see, right above the lungs. We have a larynx, don't we? Which is our vocal cords, which is way up here in our throat. And you can feel it vibrate. You know, all sound is vibration, right? You can feel it vibrate when you speak or hum or sing or whatever you like to do. But birds have their syrinx way down here, and it's right above the lungs, one branch going to one lung, one branch going to the other, and you can see all that fancy musculature, and that continues down to each branch, which means that the bird can harmonize with itself. You're going to be hearing a bird harmonize with itself in this presentation, believe it or not, because one side is producing one sound, and the other side of the syrinx is producing another sound simultaneously, and they can independently control those two sides. Usually colored, often speckled eggs, but there are exceptions. If you think about the robin's egg, for example, colored, yes, but speckled, no. Speaking of robins, here we have mama robin feeding the young. Now, here's another vocabulary word for you. Altricial is the opposite of precocial. So altricial means it takes a long time, relatively speaking. In other words, those chicks are, or at least it takes some time, because they're totally helpless at birth. And it's only a matter of maybe a few weeks before they're fledged. But for those few weeks, they depend on their mother for food, for warmth. They can't even see. They're blind, featherless, helpless at birth. What's the most altricial animal of all? We are. Ask any parent. Ask any parent. It's a long time before they're independent, right? Here's an ancient bird. Once upon a time, there were no birds, but there were dinosaurs, and it's believed that some of those dinosaurs were actually warm-blooded, which is not what we used to think. But all these things are being discovered, almost daily about prehistoric life. But so once upon a time, some of those dinosaurs started to become bird-like. But think of the huge changes that had to happen. Every feather that you see is a fancy reptilian scale. It's a dinosaur scale that's been modified into a feather. No matter what feather you're looking at, whether it's the wing flight feathers, the down feathers, whatever, they used to be reptilian scales. So isn't it marvelous what evolution has been capable of doing if given enough time and given the opportunities? And there certainly was an opportunity for this Archaeopteryx, because even though I'm sure he could not leap from the ground and then fly into the air, he probably had to climb a tree first. You see, he still has those claws, right, on his wings, which of course the wings used to be the front legs, right? The wings were the front legs. They'd become wings, but they still have claws so that Archaeopteryx could climb a tree and then glide from one branch to the next to escape the predator that was trying to climb up and reach him. We don't have to be able to see to appreciate birds. Here's a birding by ear program. I know someone, again, I live in Amherst, Massachusetts, and there's a fellow Amherstian named John Green, who is an excellent birding by ear birder, and he has a sense of humor, so he holds his binoculars up to his ear. So this is a birding by ear kind of a program, because you're going to hear all these birds. You're going to hear what they have to say. Now this first group is the primitive songbirds. They're called flycatchers, and they're also called sub-Oscines, and the true songbirds are called Oscines. That word is spelled O-S-C-I-N-E. Now let's listen to what this Pee-wee has to say. You're going to hear him saying his own name. And of course, it really is a he, not a she. It's almost always that the male bird is the one that sings. Why is the male bird singing? For one of either two two reasons. Either he's wanting to attract a mate and wanting to impress the female. Listen to how intelligent and strong and healthy I am, is what he's saying. Or he's warning another one of his species. Nope, this is my territory. You stay out. So the wood pewee says his own name. Pee-wee. Pee-wee. Do you hear that? Now look at that. Yeah. Pee-wee. Do you see how it goes up and down? Up there. Pee-wee. And then wee-you. Right? Pee-wee. Ah-dee-dee. Wee you. Now notice you're not seeing, you're seeing a lot of detail that you're not hearing. So
Can we turn your phone off?
See in that first graph there with the two humps there, the two peaks of pitch, but we only heard one. The reason we only heard one is because our ears cannot pick up the detail that a bird's ears can pick up. So the birds can hear this detail much better than we can. Also, do you see how the wee-oo goes, the wee-oo call? Wee-oo. See that sudden dramatic peak in pitch? We didn't hear that at all, right? It just went right by us, literally. Went right by us. All we hear is wee-oo. But the birds hear that dramatic rise in pitch, otherwise why would it be there, right? So, on to the next slide here. This is the wood pewee. The eggs, remember, they're usually colored, often speckled. Well, these aren't colored, are they? They are speckled, but they're not colored. There's a handsome, ring of specks around that larger end of the egg. Sometimes the nests are camouflaged with lichen so that they won't be so obvious to the predator. And, another bird that says its own name. This is the phoebe. I'm sorry that this projector is cutting off my slides, but this is the wood pewee. Phoebe, Phoebity. Here, saying its own name, Phoebe. With kind of a rough sound. Phoebe. Now, the thing about a phoebe is that they are true harbingers of spring. If you see a phoebe, you know it's spring. They do not hang around in the winter. Some of the birds that we're used to thinking of as harbingers of spring, like the robins, well, robins do hang around all winter. Mockingbirds, bluebirds, all of these are, cardinals. You see these birds throughout the winter here in New England. But the phoebe, you won't see the phoebe until spring has arrived. And you'll know you're seeing a phoebe when its tail is bobbing up and down. Okay? That's a giveaway. When you see a bird in the distance, and you see the small gray bird, the tail is bobbing up and down, that's definitely a phoebe. Great crested flycatcher, the largest of the flycatchers. And this one, here's the weep, kind of a strong call, weep. Now these sure don't sound like songs, do they? I mean, believe me, you're going to hear songbirds saying a lot more than this shortly. But that's all. And an interesting thing about flycatchers of whether it's this one or the ones you've already seen, they know their songs by instinct. They don't have to learn them from their parents or from other birds. So if you raised one of these flycatchers all by itself, that's never heard another bird in its life, it would still know how to sing its song. You wouldn't be able to say that about the true songbirds or the Oscenes that I mentioned earlier. Incidentally, if this flycatcher can find a snake skin, you know how snakes shed their skin? Okay, so they're going to find, if they find that snake skin, they'll take that and put it up on their nest, and that's kind of, it serves as a warning to other birds or predators. There might be a snake lurking about, right? But this is not something that's, isn't that a clever thing to do? No, it's totally by instinct. This bird is not thinking. There are other birds that are quite intelligent. We'll get to that later, but in this case, it's just instinct.
But the snake has had.
Here's the willow flycatcher, very sedentary bird, which itself is kind of striking. It's quite different. Most birds, if you watch birds at your feeder, they're forever moving, right? They're jerking their head up and you think about the reason for this. If they were just leisurely eating, okay, putting their head down and helping themselves to seed, what would they be at risk for? They would be at risk for some bird swooping down and so they have to be ever vigilant. And that's why they're always jerking around and checking out this and checking out that, right? Because they always want to know what's happening. The willow flycatcher just seems to be content to just hang out in one place for a long time. And the eastern kingbird. Now, what would possess ornithologists to call this small bird the eastern kingbird, and please look at the Latin name, tyrannus. Okay, what is it about this bird that makes it look so that makes it so ferocious? The answer to this is that when it's fiercely territorial, and if a large bird is circling overhead and looks menacing to the kingbird, and it's always the male that has the job of defending the nest, well, he's going to look up and see, aha, I know what to do. Here's what I'll do. I'll show my red stripe on my head, right? And then I will fly up above that bird, then land on its back and peck on its head mercilessly until that bird is out of there. And now this next slide, I think, will be quite impressive to you. Look at this photograph. All right? No bird is too big or ferocious, not even our nation's symbol, the bald eagle. Get out of my territory is what that kingbird is saying. And in fact, a kingbird was once seen to chase a small airplane. And I'm sure that he thought he won the encounter because the airplane kept going. Okay, so here's another formidable bird. Again, a small bird, but look at that beak. Okay, the northern shrike is also called the butcher bird because this bird is quite adept at hunting, not only the caterpillars and the insects that virtually all birds hunt for, but in addition, this one, and in fact, you'd be surprised how many other birds will take advantage of whatever opportunity there arises. Even the bluebird, for example, which we think of as a cute little bird, but it'll handle like mice or frogs or whatever it can find, if it can find them. So. But the northern shrike is a real hunter, and it'll take its catch and impale it on a barbed wire fence or a branch or something, and then go hunting and bring it back, bring that next one and put it next to the first one, and it's got. I guess they like to marinate their catch or something in fresh air, but. So that's the butcher. In times of scarcity, I guess they have more if they need it. The red-eyed vireo. Here am I. Where are you? Here am I. Now, this might be a familiar song to you because the chances are that this bird is singing all day long. 22,000 songs have been counted from one red-eyed vireo in the space of, the sun up to sundown. That's how many songs, and it sounds quite repetitious, but actually, yeah, red-eyed vireo. But it's actually there's actually quite a bit of variety in those songs. But he's been called the preacher bird because he just won't shut up, and that's why it's a quite familiar song to you because they will just sing. Usually birds like to sing in the dawn and maybe in the evening, but this one just all the day through. Doesn't matter it's a hot day or what. Warbling vireo. Do you think that a bird is capable of saying, "If I seize you, I will seize you, and I'll squeeze you till you squirt"? Well, listen to this, and you tell me if you think it's saying that. Someone had a good time inventing that. But it's a sing-song kind of song, isn't it? But now what's your reaction when you see this bird? He's a handsome bird, isn't he? He or she. I can't tell what I'm looking at because blue jays are a member of the crow family, the jay and crow family. You can't tell a male from a female unless you're one of them, I suppose. But what do you think about? What do you feel about these blue jays?
Bully.
Excuse me?
Bully.
Bully, she says.
Yeah.
Barbara says bully. What else? Huh? Thief. What will he steal?
Eggs.
Eggs is one thing, yeah, or chicks.
Yes.
Yeah, he's a nest robber for sure, yeah. And they'll steal, whatever they can find. Whatever, if they can overpower anyone else that has something they want, they'll take it. Did you know that blue jays eat acorns? Yeah, just like squirrels, they can plant acorns, leave them there, and then they help to plant trees just like squirrels do.
They also eat paint for calcium.
They eat paint for calcium.
Yes, we found that out.
Oh my goodness.
Yep.
I've never heard of that before.
Oh, okay.
You don't want to see it.
Would they eat peanuts?
Peanuts, sir, yeah. Yeah. You can imagine a blue jay picking over the peanuts until finally it finds one that has 3 nuts instead of 2, and then flying off with that, right? All right, let's listen to the array of sounds. Wait a minute. Yeah, this is actually not a crow. It is a blue jay. And blue jays, after all, are crows. I mean, think of it as a fancy crow. It's in the crow and jay family. But the more you listen to this, there's a lot of variety. And I don't call these songs, I call them communications. They have to be, right? Now, this is just a sampling, right? But you hear all the variety, right? Isn't that remarkable? And that sounds like a bit like a seagull, I think. And that sounds like a hawk, right? So all those are possible, and that's just a sampling. Wouldn't it be great to have a blue jay English dictionary? I don't know if anyone even has begun such a project, but blue jays are very social animals. Both mom and dad feed the chicks, and in fact, those chicks' older sibs from the last brood. These young birds that have already fledged, but they're not old enough to have their own chicks, so they'll help mom and dad to feed and defend the next brood. This is true for crows as well. American crow, very intelligent bird. Did you know that crows can invent and make tools? Okay, I'll give you an example. Yeah, is that?
Yeah, it's not taking.
Oh, you're trying to get it to fit?
Trying to change your aspect ratio.
Okay. So picture if there's a crow in a cage, and there's a morsel of food outside of its cage that he would like to reach. And, it's just, how am I going to do that? Well, there's some newspaper in that cage, and so he tears off a piece of newspaper, and he rolls it up, and now he has a tool in his beak, which he can use to shove, go through the bars of the cage and shove that morsel of food close enough so he can just go ahead and help himself to it. Speaking of which, I hate to think of crows in cages. Crows, to me, they're, and any bird in a cage that, it doesn't, all animals want to be wild. And certainly crows would be an example of that. Crows are, they remember people. So if they see someone and they've decided that person is untrustworthy, right? Not only will they remember and announce it to everyone whenever they see that person, oh, there's a no good villain abroad, right? But they'll teach their own chicks so that their chicks in turn will know and will never forget that person, regardless of what kind of mask they're wearing or whatever. It's remarkable, the things that they can know and remember. How can you tell a crow from a raven? Well, let's compare them. The raven is the largest of the songbirds, and the scruffy neck, the massive beak, that bumpy head, and look at the silhouette in the upper right of a crow compared to a raven. Behaviorally, one thing that you'll notice is that when you see a large black bird in the distance, and you're not sure whether it's a crow or a raven, watch it for a while. If it's soaring, if it does a lot of soaring, it's got to be a raven. Ravens can soar like hawks. Crows need to keep on flapping pretty much all the time. And a raven sounds like, oops, sorry about that. A raven sounds like a crow with a sore throat. So that's how you can tell by listening to it. Does it sound like it has a sore throat? Imagine trying to make this kind of range of sounds with your voice. It's pretty impressive, isn't it? All that from one bird. And that's probably just a sampling. I actually had the pleasure of meeting a tamed raven because at the Blue Hills Reservation. An elderly gentleman and this raven kind of belonged to each other, and the gentleman was wearing a leather glove, and the raven was right there. It couldn't be rehabilitated. You know, there's something that happened to its wings. It would never be able to fly and become a wild bird again. So they were good friends, this raven and this gentleman. And when the raven would speak for a while and talk and make some of these sounds, and then the fellow who owned him or was owned by him would respond and talk to him. And as he's talking, the raven was going to bob his head back and forth. He's listening, you know, he's in rapt attention. Incidentally, ravens have been seen to, a raven has been seen to fly upside down for a half mile. It's remarkable that a bird could do such a thing. You know, if you've ever seen otters swimming in a tank, they can do that, and they can twirl around. You know, but you don't think about birds as being able to, and that's a kind of a challenge for a bird. But it says something about birds, that especially crows and ravens, that they like a challenge, and it's just part of their personality that they're always trying something new, and that of course helps them to be successful if they're challenging themselves and if they have an imagination and that sort of thing. Well, we already did that one. Okay, so and we don't have too many horned larks in New England. They're the most common bird in Colorado, but you will see them from time to time in there we go. You'll see them from time to time in especially low cropped lawns near airports, that sort of thing. Okay, so this is, the purple martin is the largest of the swallows. And you're only going to see purple martins these days in these apartment houses, okay? They insist on apartment houses. And tree swallows are the most common swallow in the world. Aren't they beautiful, those shiny feathers, shiny blue feathers? And cliff swallow, unusual song, is it not? And imagine being able to make a nest out of mud like that with nothing but your beak. You hear the rattle in the middle there? What did barn swallows do before there were barns? They sure do love them. So this is where they have their nest. Just they create these holes in the side of a riverbank, and that's where they build their nest. And I'm sure it's a pretty successful strategy. It's hard for any predator to get in there if they're on a steep riverbank. Let's see. Titmouse, or rather the titmouse family, the black-capped chickadees, it's a kind of titmouse. This is the state bird of Massachusetts, and you can understand why people are so fond of black-capped chickadees. Now you're hearing the "Hey, sweetie, hey, sweetie." Do you see the sonogram there? Hey, sweetie. That's the American, North American "Hey, sweetie" sound of the song of the black-capped chickadee. Now, this is the chickadee dee 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 dee, right? So there's there are calls as well as songs. And then next up, you're going to hear the sweetie hey, only on Martha's Vineyard. It's the Martha's Vineyard dialect of the black-capped chickadee. Okay? And other birds have dialects too. It's not just black-capped chickadees. You ever done this? Have you ever had a black-capped chickadee come to you? It takes a little bit of patience. If you go to the Ipswich Sanctuary, north of Boston, it's an Audubon Society, an Audubon sanctuary, the birds are already tamed there. They will come to you, not just black-capped chickadees, others, tufted titmice and other birds. They'll come right to you because they know you're safe. They know that they're inside the Ipswich Sanctuary and that people who come there are to be trusted. Isn't that remarkable? If you hear a bird saying, Peter, 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 that's the tufted titmouse. But they say a lot of other things too. Peter, 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 Peter. These are funny little birds. They love to put hair in their nest. And if they can't find any hair lying around, well, they'll just dive bomb an animal and help themselves. In fact, a couple of times, I've done this program so many times, and on 2 occasions, people came up to me and said, it happened to me too. Imagine you're lying there on your lawn chair, beautiful day, and suddenly you feel a bird on your head yanking hair out of your scalp. So if you groom your cat or your dog, go ahead and put that hair outside, and the birds will appreciate it. Or put eggshells, as the gentleman said, that getting calcium, probably more healthy for the birds if they help themselves to eggshells. Just crumble the eggshells pretty fine into small pieces and put that out along, on a feeder tray or something and see if the birds don't help themselves. They also might appreciate thread and, just fine pieces of maybe scraps of cloth or yarn or other things that might be of interest to birds. They'll incorporate those in their nests. This is a small bird. The small bird, but it's got a loud song. Wait a minute, this is this is it. This is red-breasted nuthatch. Ank, ank, ank.
I say oink, oink.
Oink, 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 okay. They eat seeds of conifers and whatever they can find. Of course, virtually all birds, virtually all birds need to find caterpillars and other insects to feed to their young because their young need that high protein food source. So seeds and fruit just wouldn't be sufficient to raise chicks. White-breasted nuthatch. What? This is the upside-down bird. Very interesting markings, don't you think? That black racing stripe over its head. And you can see they go out upside down all the time. Why do you suppose they're doing that? Well, because they've got to find food, and that's one way to do it, is to go upside down and look what's hiding underneath the bark. And if they're going upside down, they're going to see things that they wouldn't be seeing if they were just like going wherever, And it's so there's a good chance that there'll be something hiding and waiting for them to snatch up. But here's the bird that goes up the tree and looking underneath the bark and goes in a kind of a spiral direction as he or she goes around that trunk, and then finally, decides to drop down and then start at the bottom of another tree and just go up in a spiral. It's the brown creeper. Oops, that's not it. High-pitched song, the brown creeper. Fairly small bird with a curved beak, long curved beak. Very well camouflaged, as you can see. I've only seen one in my life that I can think of. Yeah. You do? Okay. And then there are the wrens. Those perky small birds with the loud songs, the tail sticking straight up. Kettle-dee, 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 kettle is that song. So it's almost a galloping song, isn't it? Carolina wren. That's a pretty complicated song, isn't it? Just a lot of jumbled sounds in there, one followed by the other. A very, very fast-paced song. But if you're impressed by this, before I show you the song, before I play the recording of the Winter Wren song, I'm going to show you the sonogram. This is the musical composition that you are about to hear. I want you to appreciate just how complex this is. Because all this, you see the numbers below, this entire thing takes only 7 seconds for a bird to sing. And, it's not always exactly 7 seconds, but you get the idea, which is actually a fairly long time for a bird to sing, especially when it's singing such a complicated song. I mean, that's a real accomplishment, I think. He just keeps going. Notice how there's some parts of the song that are they seem to be very highly organized, and, and there's a lot of repetition. But even the more random appearing places of the song, like here, and you compare that to here. Pretty much the same thing, isn't it? So there's repetition and there's a structure to that song. Now, I wish that I had a recording that slows it way down. I don't. So you'll just have to listen and awestruck as we play the real-time version. Let's hear it again. All right. So if you're the female winter wren, I hope you're impressed with that song. Because that's really the whole point of it, isn't it? The male is bragging about how fancy a song he can sing. And that's why, over the course of time, they've gotten fancier and fancier and fancier. And don't think that he didn't practice that song. He did. I can assure you. They're not born learning how to sing that song. They listen to their elders, and they practice and practice and practice. Here's a marsh wren. Sounds kind of similar to that winter wren. It's a pretty complicated song. They'll make 15 of those dummy nests. You see that round nest, which is about the size of a softball, and they'll make 15 of those. And of course, there's no eggs in all the dummy nests, and then they'll put the real one, in some more out of the way place that hopefully the nest robbers won't find. High-pitched song of the tiny, tiny golden-crowned kinglet. This bird is so small, much smaller than a black-capped chickadee. Very high-pitched song. I found one dead once on the trail, and I picked it up, and oh my gosh. It looked like a baby, but it was a full-grown, right? Full-grown bird. Listen to the beautiful song. This will make you think spring. It will make you feel spring. Just listen to it. Ruby-crowned kinglet. Incidentally, how many of you have ever heard, either in person or a recording, of the song of a nightingale? Okay, one person. I want everyone here to have that experience. I'm not going to give it to you, but all you have to do the next time you have access to a computer, you do a search for song Nightingale, and there's a 3-hour-long YouTube recording, which I think is probably the second choice there. You may not want to listen to it for 3 hours, but it'll be hard to turn it off. I can tell you that. You'll be entranced. I'll just leave it at that. You'll be entranced by this. And there are other wonderful songbirds all over the world, too, that are considered, by people who live there to be their own nightingale. Let's listen to the blue-gray gnatcatcher. Blue-gray gnatcatcher starts out kind of a simple song, and then it becomes gradually more and more complex. Look at how the mother barely fits inside her own nest, right? Looks kind of cramped, doesn't she? Everyone's favorite, the eastern bluebird. So all these facts are from allaboutbirds.org, the website that I was telling you about, the Cornell Laboratory of Ornithology. Any bird on the continent you can learn about in that way. So this is, from day by day, there they are, getting bigger every day until finally, at 2.5 weeks, there's only one left. And these are adult bluebirds roosting together in the winter because they keep each other warm, right? And in fact, it looks like all the males are on one side and all the females are on the other side, doesn't it? Because the males are the ones that are deep blue, the females are not. Now, the veery is one of the thrushes, and the thrushes are generally seen as being the most beautiful songsters of all our songbirds. A resonating, ethereal song. I'm reminded of a spiral, a liquid spiral of silver or gold, right? Hermit thrush. Each song will start on one clear whistled note, but it'll be a different note every time. It'll either be higher or lower than the whistled note that began the previous phrase. Here it comes, another whistled note. You hear it starts with one clear whistled note? Okay, so that's the hermit thrush. Hermit is the guy that whistles to begin his song. Okay? Again, a captivating thrush song. You can hear the hermit thrush perhaps in the evening. And then the wood thrush. Now, I promised you that you would hear a bird harmonizing with itself. This is the one. And you're going to hear at 1/10 speed. First you'll hear one side of its syrinx, then you'll hear the other side, and then you'll hear both sides together. I'm not sure how the person who recorded it managed to separate these two sounds, because I doubt if the hermit thrush ever does, or the winter thrush rather, the wood thrush, excuse me, if the wood thrush ever sings those separately. But you're treated to the recording now of one side of the syrinx, then the other side, then both together. And now together. And now you probably want to hear the regular speed recording, right? Which this is what it actually sounds like in real time. And this is the one that I call the nightingale of New England. But you're not hearing any harmony because it's just going by so fast. It does strike me that you're almost listening to a ventriloquist, or or maybe the suggestion of an echo. Yes.
Could wood thrush more be found in the woods or in the backyard? Because I don't think I've ever heard them in my backyard.
Yeah, they probably do need woods. Yeah. Are there any birders here who can give us a tip on where to find wood thrushes? Okay. By the way, an American robin is also a thrush. You wouldn't know it to listen to him. It sounds pretty plebeian. The song is not nearly as fancy and transporting and enchanting as the songs that we've heard from the other thrushes, but it is technically a thrush. Cheerio, cheery up, cheerio. the catbird. Catbirds are pretty bold. They'll come right up to you, pretty close range. And they like to hang out at the shrub layer, so you can be really eye to eye with catbirds. And they don't repeat themselves too much. There's the cat sound, right? And they do some imitation, but I think a lot of what they're singing is whatever they come up with are on their own. Ooh. This recording is distorted for some reason. I'm not sure what's happening. I think I need to do a fresh recording. I think the CD has been played so many times. It's time to replace it. Oh, I'm sorry about this. This has never happened before. Anyway, when you listen to a hummingbird, they like to repeat themselves before they'll go on, and then they'll pause and then go on to a new phrase. I have a special hummingbird story to share. I was a musician in North Carolina, the Chapel Hill, Durham, Raleigh area, and there's a wonderful piano player named Yusuf Salim. We called him Brother Yusuf because he called you a brother or sister the first day he meets you, your family. And so I was Brother John. And he'd give you a hug the first day he meets you. I mean, he'll adopt you immediately. Wonderful musician. And so I was just learning how to play jazz, and I had the experience of being able to improvise with him playing the piano. He's also a composer and arranger, so I got to play in his sextet, playing tenor saxophone. Wonderful, wonderful guy, and just, I felt that I could really grow as a musician in large part because of Brother Yusuf's guidance and support. And I moved up to Massachusetts in 1983, but a few years ago I heard that Brother Yusuf was in a long-term care facility and he did not have long for this world. So I went down and visited him, and I gave him a massage, and I just talked with him, and I really felt that it was a special time that I had with him. And I knew as I left that I wouldn't see him again. I got into my car and closed the door, and a mockingbird flew down and lit right on my side view mirror and stayed there for a couple of minutes. That's never happened before. It's never going to happen again. I feel that mockingbird was sent by Brother Yusuf's spirit, even though he hadn't died yet. But perhaps he was asleep and his spirit could see. I'm a scientist, but I also know that things happen that science doesn't understand and cannot explain. And I've read countless books about such topics, and I think that scientists should be open-minded to realize there's more than just the mechanical, we know what they know, and okay, and the more we're open to it, the more we'll learn. So, in fact, I'm certainly not the only person who has experienced birds as emissaries of, like, for example, someone who's departed. A woman told me once that she really missed her father-in-law, and her father-in-law really loved bluebirds and loved taking them to places where they could hear bluebirds. And then a bluebird came and just made its presence known right in the backyard of the widow, of this fellow's widow, in a place where that bluebird had never been seen. Bluebirds had never been seen before. And here's this one just like perching right there, looking right at the kitchen window at her. It's just like, that's too much. That's not a coincidence, right? And many such incidents happen that people report. Here's the brown thrasher. Let's see if we can get a sound out of this one. One, two. I was just down in Virginia Beach this past weekend visiting my son, and I hadn't seen or heard a brown thrasher in a long time. But at first they sound, oh, could that be a mockingbird? But just two in a row. A mockingbird's usually not content to do two in a row. It's usually 3 or 4 in a row, or more. And they look quite different, of course. The famous composer, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, was humming a melody, and then a starling repeated it. And Mozart said, and this was in a pet store. Mozart said, I'll take that bird. Okay? And there's a whole book about it, Mozart and the starling. And this starling was a pet of Mozart's, almost like a companion. I mean, you know, when the bird died, Mozart gave him a full royal funeral. So that book is quite moving. And so you can hear then that there's a vast variety of things. They're relatives of mynah birds. So while birders don't like them because they're an invasive bird and they don't belong here. They're not natives. But you got to hand it to them. They're remarkably talented vocalists. But they sound spooky. High-pitched song of the cedar waxwing, a fairly small bird that loves fruit and sometimes will get drunk eating fermented fruit and can even die. You know, a cedar waxwing can even perish from eating too much fermented fruit. So I guess wild animals can be tempted just like we can. So here's the Bohemian waxwing. High-pitched trill. We don't see too many of those around here in New England, or at least not here. Farther north, you're more likely to find a Bohemian. And some of Joe Oliverio's photography, Bohemian waxwing. And there are a lot of warblers in New England. Here's the chestnut-sided. Pleased to meet you. Here's the yellow warbler. Sweet, I'm so sweet. Here's, Weesey, black and white. Weesey, like a squeaky wheel. Now, I don't know why these birds are called warblers. I think they should be called squeakers. Because clearly they are not warbling, they are squeaking. Witchety, says, look at that black mask of the male. Witchety. Chirty. Gets louder as it goes. That's the ovenbird, which is also a warbler, believe it or not. It's called an ovenbird because the nest is like a Dutch oven, and it's on the ground. It's not on a branch; it's on the ground. But it's very well hidden, and the bird is very surreptitious. You almost never see an ovenbird. You can hear one, but you almost never see it. Bay-breasted warbler, black-throated blue, black-throated green, black pole, blue-winged warbler, northern parula, pine warbler, blackburnian, Cape May. You can see you have your hands full learning your warblers, right? The Louisiana water thrush is also a warbler, believe it or not. It looks like a thrush, but it's not. So is the American redstart, another warbler. Scarlet tanager is not a warbler, it's a tanager. And when you hear a song that sounds like a robin with a sore throat, remember how a raven is a crow with a sore throat? Well, a tanager is a robin with a sore throat. Let's see. Wait a minute. Here it is. Isn't that remarkable that the female doesn't have a hint of scarlet? She's all about camouflage, and he is all about being showy. They have very different, that plumage is very different for those reasons. You hear that chick burr? Chick burr, okay? Chick burr. Drink your tea. The funniest song of all. Drink your tea. Drink your tea. Here's some different dialects of song, the drink your tea song. One of my favorites, the song sparrow, Melospisa melodia. Don't you love that name? Melospisa melodia, the Latin name. Look at that. Maids, 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 please put the tea kettle on. Right? I could just listen to a song sparrow all day. They don't repeat themselves, and they're just endlessly joyful. That's what it sounds like to me. Yeah.
It's nice to see one perched like
Yes.
on a rooftop,
Yeah.
right in full view,
Yeah.
singing and singing.
Okay. Now in Canada, they think that the white-throated sparrow is saying, "Oh, sweet Canada, Canada, Canada." But of course, here in America, we insist it's saying, "Old Sam, Peabody, 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 Peabody." Chipping sparrow. Sounds like chipping, doesn't it? Chipping sound. Vesper. Do, 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 do. See, hear those long, clear notes, a couple of them in do, 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 do. That's the Vesper sparrow. Fox sparrow. Listen to those rich whistled notes, one after another. Do, 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 do. Before it erupts into a warble at the end. Fairly large sparrow, by the way. Dark-eyed junco, we all recognize this guy at our feeders. But we only see them in the winter. We're not going to hear their song because they're singing their song up far north, right? Cardinals have a rich vocabulary, don't they? A rich repertoire. The females also sing, by the way. Their songs are a little bit different, but they do sing. And sometimes they'll sing almost like in a call and response. It's called a duet, you know. And they might even overlap their duets a little bit. What a beautiful song. Rose-breasted grosbeak, it sounds like a robin that's taken singing lessons. So it's the same kind of interrupted pattern that a robin sings, but it sounds so sweeter, doesn't it? Much richer and sweeter song.
I like the white ring around his eye.
Oh, yes. Evening grosbeak. And the indigo bunting. How many of you have seen an indigo bunting? A few people. Here's the fellow who has the tuxedo backwards. He's wearing a tuxedo backwards, isn't he? That's the male, that's the female. Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like a bubbling bobolink, doesn't it? I wish I could play this for you slowed down by a factor of 10. Not a very melodious song here, the red-winged blackbird, but it sure is successful. There are probably more red-winged blackbirds than any other kind of bird on this continent. Spring of the earth, says the eastern meadowlark. Spring of the earth. Common grackle. Huge flocks of these might come down on your yard, and then just suddenly, without warning, they'll leave. They seem to like water. Look at that dramatic eye with the black circles in the middle of white. Now, do you hear the pebble dropping in water? That sounds like a pebble dropping in water, doesn't it? That's the song of the male brown-headed cowbird. Why don't birders like cowbirds? I'll tell you why. That's a sparrow on the left. That's the mother feeding its adopted cowbird chick. She doesn't know it's adopted. She's been fooled because the egg was laid in her nest by a brown, it's called nest, displacer. I forgot the name of it. Anyway, she's been fooled. Now, not every mother bird is fooled in this way. Sometimes they will try to push the egg out of their nest, and if they can't, they're just going to build a new nest on top of the old. They will refuse to incubate that imposter egg. But enough birds are fooled so that this kind of thing happens, where this poor sparrow is feeding a bird twice its size, but it must be my baby. It came from my nest, right? So, this is my responsibility. Well, anyway, on with the show. And one of my favorites, the Baltimore Oriole. Whoop. So, it's a beautiful song, a beautiful bird. They have a sweet tooth. They like to eat orange slices or grape jelly. Listen to that song. Such a sweet song. Oh. That's the orchard oriole. Also a beautiful song. Husky whispering trills of the pine siskin. Purple finch. House finch, looks like the red, dipped his head in red paint. And my last recording for you is American goldfinch. Can you hear it say, potato chip, potato chip? But that's not all he says. Keep listening. They love to eat thistle seeds and sunflower seeds and then there's some birds that we won't see or hear because they don't live around here. They need spruce fir forest, which only occurs farther north. Birds need water, and you don't have to spend a lot for a bird bath. That's a pretty simple affair there, isn't it? In fact, even simpler, you might be able to find something that will work as a bird bath. Okay? Upside down garbage can lids. Right? Now, you do have a responsibility to keep that water clean. You have to, rinse them out every once in a while. But it's not just birds. Butterflies and other insects need water also. There are many choices of bird feeders, many kinds of setups. Homemade suet feeders. Homemade suet. Now, oak tree is probably the top of the list for the most popular tree or plant for birds. Why? Because so many different kinds of and quantities of caterpillars are feasting on the leaves of the oak that there's dinner. Just pick them up, pick them off. So think about just like you don't think about an oak tree as being, the birds flocking around the oak tree, but they do. Another favorite of the birds, there's no fruit that tastes better than a mulberry to hungry birds. And if they if there are blueberries around, now you know how popular blueberries are with birds, but the birds will ignore the blueberry bushes and they will go for the mulberry instead. You won't even have to net your blueberries if you have a mulberry tree. So all these trees, Juneberry, elderberry is a shrub, wild raisin, another shrub, viburnum, great, all the dogwoods have fruit that's very appreciated by birds. Pokeweed is a wild weed. Staghorn sumac berries, on into the winter they can help themselves. Spicebush, hawthorn, crabapple, holly, black cherry, chokecherry, all the plums, blueberry and huckleberry, of course, blackberry, northern bayberry. All the conifers have seeds and also offer, place to be protected. And they can also find, just like on an oak tree, they can find insects to feed on. Here's the ground cover that has berries. Another one. Sunflower seeds. They certainly appreciate, they don't have to be on a feeder. They can be on the plant itself, can't they? But they're not the only flowers that have edible seeds. So do black-eyed Susans and purple coneflowers and others. Before I conclude my presentation, I'd like to show you some remarkable photographs of birds, of designs of birds. How many of you have seen crop circles before? Pictures of crop circles. Yeah, this is an amazing phenomenon. I actually present Majesty and Mystery of Crop Circles. I did it just a couple of evenings ago at the North Stonington, Connecticut Garden Club, and they were wowed, I can tell you, because I knew nothing about this topic until about a decade ago. And then I just started to learn. The more I learned, the more impressed I was that what you're looking at here is a farmer's field in southern England. And somehow those plants have been pushed down to the ground to make these patterns. And the way they do it, the way it happens is that some energy makes the plant stems expand and bend. So it's not happening mechanically. It's happening with some kind of energy. And it's directing the plants very precisely to go in a certain direction. I'm convinced, from my scientific point of view, if you're a scientist, you kind of research something. The more I've learned, the more I'm convinced that people are not capable of doing this. But they are intelligently designed, which means that there is intelligence, in my opinion, that's more sophisticated than us. We're being visited by extraterrestrials who care about us. Okay, now. Please understand, because we're taught to think of extraterrestrials as being nasty, like they're out to get us. I don't think so. I think that they're actually spiritually evolved as well as technologically evolved, and that they want to help us out. And boy, do we need help right now. I don't think anyone would argue with that. So, and maybe if we could understand what they're trying to tell us, and that certainly looks like code, doesn't it? Behind that swallow. And maybe they're ready to make contact with us if we're ready to make contact with them. And if we did, maybe this planet could be saved, because it's not looking too good right now. If we keep on using fossil fuels, I'm sure they can tell us what to do that's much better than fossil fuels and much better than carbon footprint and all that. So, anyway, I got to place my hope somewhere. That's one thing that I hope will be in our future. But I also do want to point out that. There are a lot fewer birds than there used to be. There are a lot fewer insects than there used to be. Those two facts are not separate, of course, because birds need insects, as I said. They can't raise a brood of chicks without. And do you know that the insect populations are down about 75 to 80% compared to a couple of decades ago? In our lifetimes, it's just like far. Do you remember when you used to be able to drive along and all these insects would be plastered on your windshield and your grill? And do you realize that doesn't happen anymore? That is just how alarming the situation is. Now, why is that? Because there's not enough food for them to eat. They depend on plants. They depend on they depend on wild areas, and they can't live in parking lots or people's well manicured lawns. I mean, that's a food desert for them, right? And so there's just so much desert that wildlife can't live. And so what we can do is take some of that lawn and either make it into a bee lawn, like let the clover grow. Don't mow it. Don't put chemicals on it. Mow it only every other week. Okay, so that give the clover a chance, give the dandelions a chance. Yes, I am saying give the dandelions a chance. Okay, because they pollinate dandelions, and we can't make it without the insects. Our ecosystem will collapse, perhaps even sooner than it will collapse due to the effects of global warming. It's that serious. They call it the insect apocalypse, and it's been in the newspapers and magazines for especially the last year. It suddenly came to our attention just how desperate this situation is. Also, of course, we have to put a lot fewer chemicals into the environment, and I think we'll be healthier ourselves if we don't eat food that's been poisoned by all these chemicals. You know, the big ag uses these chemicals. So the more we go towards organic agriculture, which is also a lot friendlier in terms of carbon footprint than big ag is, you know, we can be working on both of these issues simultaneously. So thank you for joining me, and thank you for doing what you can to pass on because it'll take all of us. Right? It'll take all of us, won't it? It'll take all of us working together and realizing how we can change our lives. How perhaps we don't need to buy as much stuff as we're used to buying, because the less stuff we buy, the less of a carbon footprint we'll have on this planet. Thank you.
Thank you so much. How about one more round of applause for John Root and the great program. And thanks again to the Wayland Cultural Council for sponsoring this program.
Can we ask questions?
Yeah.
Okay, I have two. One on Sunday's New York Times.